Hello and welcome back to the NUFC Opinion Blog for another fan feature interview. Today I'm joined by Yousef Hatem. And Yousef is a true faith writer who's appeared on various platforms that they've put out. He's appeared on the podcast, he's appeared on Writer's Block, and also writes for the fanzine and website. Yousef, how are you doing tonight?
Very well, thanks, Dan. Yourself?
I'm doing fine. Thank you very much for coming on today. Firstly, Yousef, how would you summarise what has been a pretty awful season?
I think you've just summarised it just there.
Probably have done, yes.
It's been a strange one, hasn't it? Because it feels. How do you go about describing a situation where none of us have been there? But it seems to have mattered a lot more. I wrote an article in the fanzine last month about. I think it's possibly because of the dearth of other sort of things to do and other pastimes to get involved in that. I found myself looking forward to the match a lot more. And it's probably struck me, therefore, as even more of a disappointment when it's really not gone how you would have liked. Mm-hmm. Because then there's no there's no night out to look forward to afterwards and all the rest of it. So it's been a hugely disappointing season, even by the standards of what we'd come to get used to under Ashley. Although what I would say is, I don't think it's been a massive surprise. We played very poorly last season. I think our league, they say the table doesn't lie, but I think last season, if anyone had looked at the way we were playing, our performances.
Yeah, no, I agree completely.
So some of the results we got, how we didn't lose 5-0 at home to Chelsea and won 1-0 in the last minute, I'll never know. How we won away at Sheffield United, I'll never know. We really rode our luck a lot last season. I think this season it's come home to roost quite a bit.
I think it was just the after effects of Rafa were just sort of underpinning some of the luck we got, and now that that's gone away completely, it's showing.
Yeah, I agree.
Sort of the issues that have become and manifested themselves within the club. Now, going into the last few games of the season, Newcastle still in relegation fight, as we know. How do you see them going?
I see it going to the last day. My concern is that when it goes to the last day, Fulham, in all likelihood, will have a superior goal difference to us, which essentially means that if we're not 4 points ahead of them going into that game, we'll need something from it. And that's my concern. I think it'll come down to that game. I don't want to go into that game needing something. And given that there'll be fans back in the ground, the Fulham fans are not known for being particularly hostile, but nonetheless,
yeah.
With fans back in the ground, it just feels like it's all been teed up for Newcastle to let us down there. So I don't take an awful lot of comfort from the fact that we're still, say, 3 points ahead of them, because actually that's not going to be enough with the game to go because of what that fixture list has thrown up.
Indeed, yeah. With that being said, do you think we will stay up, or do you think we'll go down? If it does come down to the way you say it, what do you think would happen?
I'm afraid to say I think we'll go down.
Lovely and positive.
I do. I'm not as sort of resigned to it as perhaps some of the fan base. I do think it will go to the last day. I don't see the next few games. I don't know about you, but the next few games, there's a tendency sometimes to say, oh, well, this is where we'll pick up our points and this is where we won't.
Yeah.
Actually, the way things have gone this season, that's really not the way things have been. If you look at Fulham, they picked up 6 points from Liverpool and Everton away back to back. We've picked up our points. We drew with Liverpool at home. We beat Everton away. And that's some of the only points that we picked up during that entire period. And we lost to Sheffield United and Aston Villa and all of the rest of it. So I wouldn't write off, for example, the Leicester, even the City, the Arsenal games as much as some perhaps would. So I don't think it's all going to be over before the last game. I don't think we're going to be down. I think it will go to the wire. Yeah. I think some people think, we'll be dead and buried by then because of the fixture list. I'm not as defeatist as that, but when it comes to the Fulham game, I think that'll be a bridge too far for us.
If we are to go down, do you see us coming straight back up again? It would be a third time, of course, under Mike Ashley's reign. Could Leighton strike a third time? It's unlikely, but
not with Bruce as manager. It's an interesting one again because there was a view which was expressed when we appointed Bruce that he was partly appointed because if we did go down, he would be well placed to get us promoted again. It's a very long time since Steve Bruce got anyone promoted.
Exactly.
He was manager at Villa.
It had a lot of money thrown at that squad. And
Yeah, the biggest budget. And I don't remember Sheffield Wednesday running away with the league when we swooped to poach him from them.
No.
So I don't think that, with the best will in the world, Steve Bruce as manager of this squad will get them promoted. And of course, some of the better players will leave. I mean, in previous seasons, last time we managed to keep Rafa, and the time before we managed to keep the nucleus of what was a decent enough Premier League squad. So very hard to say, but I wouldn't be confident of a bounce back.
Yeah. Now, given your role as a lawyer and having written about this and spoken about this for True Faith several occasions, I think you probably knew this was coming at some point, considering how much I think you've had to say about it of late. With the ongoing takeover saga and the arbitration case, give me your thoughts and sort of your understanding of it all.
Well, there's two things that I think are often put together. And as you say, there is a lot of sort of content I've generated. Some of it is speculation because I don't have any sort of insider information as to what's happening that others don't. I just try to interpret what I see being reported because I've got the legal background. But the thing that's important is to separate the takeover on the one hand from the arbitration on the other. The arbitration needs to go in Newcastle's favour in order for the takeover to be back on. But there does seem to be a misconception that if the arbitration does go in Newcastle's favour, then the takeover is definitely back on. And it's not quite right. So I think one concern that I have, although, understandably I do get asked about the legal questions, I'm very happy to give my view on those, is actually the commercial situation is more important here, because arbitration is a long process. As things stand right now, the panel has only just been constituted because Newcastle challenged the chairman being on it, which means the process hasn't really started. It is a long process, not least because all of the lawyers who are on the panel, they do have other cases and other jobs to work on as well. They're not just dedicated to this 100% of the time. That's not how the legal industry works. And there's some very complicated arguments that need to be made. So it will take quite a long time. Now, I don't know exactly how many months or whether we might be going into years as to how long it might take. But my concern would be that even if it goes in Newcastle's favour, and I'm not defeatist about Newcastle's prospects of winning the arbitration, there are some plausible arguments that suggest Newcastle could win it. On balance, I don't think they will, but they might. My concern is that even if Newcastle do win the arbitration, the circus will have packed up and left town by then anyway, because, PIF they're not Geordies, Staveley and Ruben, they're not just holding out because they have some emotional tie to Newcastle. They've got money to invest on behalf of a state and its people. And if the returns aren't available through Newcastle United, then they'll put that investment elsewhere, just like you would expect any prudent investor to do. There is no envelope under the bed that just says Newcastle United only on it. That's just not the case. So, and I'm happy to talk about this sort of specific legal points a bit more, but my concern with the whole thing is people tend to get their hopes up. Legal processes are long. They need to be. It can be very frustrating, but they're long because they need to be. And we started it. I mean, we started this process.
Mm-hmm.
They take as long as they take. And unfortunately, in the meantime, the circumstances that actually gave rise to PIF and Staveley and Co being interested in the first place may well change, which brings us back to the question of whether we're actually going to stay up, because if we don't stay up, then we're a far less attractive investment opportunity, irrespective of whether the takeover could go ahead legally or not. So it all comes back to the next few games.
Yeah, on-field matters indeed.
Exactly.
Now, obviously, given the fact that you know about sort of the specific legal matters, my understanding of the arbitration is that they're trying to sort of separate the Saudi state from the PIF. Is that how it is, or is there more to it than that?
that in a nutshell is how it is, yes. But it's important to go back to what the specific question is. The question is not whether the Saudi state is an extension of PIF, or PIF is an extension of the Saudi state. The question is whether the Premier League was reasonable in coming to that view that PIF was an extension of the Saudi state last year. Now, that might sound like the same thing. It might sound like legal niceties, but it's a very high bar. What the arbitration is looking at is, was the Premier League's decision so unreasonable that it's wrong, and they couldn't possibly have come to it on a plausible basis? That's quite a high bar than just the Premier League thinking, on balance, we think PIF and the Saudi state are maybe a bit different. It's a little bit of a higher bar that the club has to clear there, because the Premier League is a decision maker, just like company directors are decision makers. And courts and arbitrators tend not to like to interfere where they can get away with not interfering. So they'll give the benefit of the doubt if they're in two minds as to whether the Premier League got it right last year. My view would be they will probably give the benefit of the doubt to the Premier League. So you're absolutely right to say that's what the arbitration is about. But the threshold that the club has to meet is a fairly high one. And if the arbitration is successful, there will essentially be a finding that the Premier League determined that question incorrectly last year. Now, that does not mean that the next step is we continue with the takeover. What it essentially means is the owners and directors test has to then be followed in respect of PIF. And there's a possibility that PIF might not pass it. I think PIF probably would pass it, but there are further delays in the process. It's not that, on a Thursday, the arbitration will be determined in Newcastle's favour, and then on Friday morning, we'll see the Saudi Crown Prince being paraded down in the Haymarket. That's not going to happen. But you are right in how you describe the main issue that's before the arbitration, but there's a lot of hurdles that have to be crossed even after that, as takeover advocates hope goes in the club's favour.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting, of course, and I think it's important to hear from someone like yourself who probably has a better understanding than, say, a lot of other people who are just sort of speculating on the matter. So you mentioned that obviously, on balance, the arbitration may not go in Newcastle's favour. What do you think could swing it in Newcastle's favour if it was to go that way?
Well, the difficulty here is that arbitration's a private process. So what I do not have, and what nobody has apart from the club, the arbitrators, and the Premier League and their lawyers, is actually sight of the specific legal arguments and papers that are actually being drafted. Without seeing those, it's very difficult to come to a view on, whether the club's going to succeed or not, or what could change my mind. Because we're not going to see anything really happen in the arbitration until there's an outcome.
Yeah.
The one thing I would say is I don't think that the club could, in good conscience, and the lawyers involved could not, in good conscience, pursue these arguments unless they had at least some possibility of succeeding. Lawyers are not allowed to do that. Now, lawyers do fight cases that, on balance, they think might fail. But what lawyers are not allowed to do is to argue cases that are, manifestly hopeless and have absolutely no chance at all. So by virtue of that fact alone, by virtue of the fact the arbitration is even happening and that pretty respected lawyers on both sides are contesting it, that it's a serious issue, that serious people are arguing about it, and there'll be plausible arguments both ways. Sorry, that's not a particularly...
No. It fully makes sense to me. I know it's a good answer in my opinion, because of course you're right in saying that we can't know the sort of specifics and the intricacies of what is going on because it is a private matter. But from the way you've answered that, I understand even more myself.
But I mean, if you look at PIF's website, it is essentially a government ministry. It is the web is pif.gov.sa. That's Saudi Arabia. That is quite difficult to escape that PIF is essentially an extension of the Saudi state. So it's quite obvious that that's the Premier League's position. They've expressed essentially that to be the position. Newcastle's argument is likely to be along the lines of essentially separate corporate personality, in the same way that, you know, a company is not the same as its directors, and its shareholders are different from its directors, and different family members have different legal personality. The club will be pointing to that sort of strict delineation, and will be essentially be making the argument that, you know, if PIF and the Saudi state were the same thing, then there'd be no need for PIF to exist. The Saudi state could just invest directly. Mm-hmm. So all of these arguments are plausible. It will depend on the facts. And that's, again, why I go back to the delays, because, you know, we can toss around this is what the Premier League's arguments are likely to be and what they're likely to look like. This is what Newcastle United's arguments are likely to be and likely to look like. They'll make some legal submissions to the arbitrators, and they'll share them with each other as to what those arguments are. But then what will have to happen is there will have to be some evidence. Now, whether that's in the form of documents which show, you know, what PIF is, whether it's witness statements from people involved on the Saudi side explaining what their role is and what their role isn't. There may be expert evidence from, you know, industry experts who have dealings with PIF and have dealings with the Saudi state and have a view one way or the other as to whether they're distinct or not. All of this stuff is exactly why any legal process, and that's true of arbitration just as it is of, you know, the traditional court process, that's what takes the time. That's what takes the time. This sort of kind of courtroom dramas that you see where somebody just comes into the courtroom at the 11th hour and goes, I've got it. That's not how these processes work. They're prepared and they're exchanged, and then you get questions, and then you get replies, and then all of this stuff takes an awful long time. And that's only more the case in circumstances where, you know, the issues are very serious and there's a lot at stake. So in a nutshell, no, I don't have any particularly strong view one way or the other as to whose arguments are better. But firstly, it's going to take a long time, and in the meantime, I think PIF will move on. And secondly, the bar, the threshold, the standard that the club actually has to meet and satisfy the panel is a very high one. So neither of these two things are good for the takeover, and the takeover is not going to happen just because of how the arbitration comes out.
Well, I think we've covered all bases on that point, so thank you very much for that, Yousef. Moving on.
Now, there's always going to be news.
Oh, there'll be more twists in the tail, I'm sure, that to come. I'm sure there'll be more things that get said, so I'll happily have you back on at another point. But anyway, moving on to things that may be a little bit more sort of positive and nice to talk about. What would you say was your earliest memory of supporting Newcastle United?
It's interesting, that one. It's because I'm not going to say it's a positive. It is a positive memory in a way. My earliest memory of supporting Newcastle was actually the season we got promoted to the Premier League. It's 92-93.
Yeah.
I actually didn't go to my first game at St James's until 94. It was a 4-2 win over Chelsea. Andy Cole scored a fantastic goal in at the near post against Karine with his left foot. You'll see it replayed time and time again. It's a very, very famous goal of that early period. But actually, my earliest Newcastle memory is 92-93. And our next door neighbours at the time, they were from Grimsby. And Newcastle won, I think, the first 10 games. And the first defeat of the season was 1-0 at home to Grimsby. And I remember, as I said, I didn't go to the game, but my dad did. And I remember him coming up the driveway in his car after the game, and the neighbours had put a big bed sheet on the garden fence saying Newcastle 0, Grimsby 1, better luck next time. But, you know, ultimately that was a very successful season. We got promoted, and I didn't really get to go to Newcastle matches very much at the time. I actually was brought up on Teesside, and hence the accent not being really Geordie, it's more Teesside. And used to be much easier to get tickets to go to Middlesbrough or even to Darlington at the time. You just could not get a ticket for Newcastle. I was one of the ones lucky to get a season ticket when the ground was extended, and my dad was moved, and they offered him a second ticket, and it came to me. But yeah, most of my early memories are of sort of dad going to the game and coming back rather than me being there.
Very good. Do you have any players that you've idolised growing up supporting the club?
I'd say my favourite player of recent year, I loved Solano. I absolutely loved Nobby Solano. Just the way he played the game, he just caressed the football. Looked like he had lots of time on the ball. Some of the set pieces he could take out them and playing the ball with the inside or the outside of the foot. And he just seemed like a player who really enjoyed being on Tyneside and really enjoyed being at the club. And I don't think he actually cost very much. He was a Dalglish signing. Dalglish made quite a lot of good signings, which ultimately came good long after Dalglish left the club. So he left us with Given, Speed and Solano, who were playing great stuff for us well into Sir Bobby's time. But Solano was just a fantastic footballer. Even though I do share my name with Hatem Ben Arfa, so I really should say, yeah.
I mean, and to be fair, in my time as a season ticket holder, he's probably the most talented player I've seen at Newcastle.
Oh, wonderful player.
In the last, fantastic player. Just shame about his attitude. Could have been, he could have probably been one of the best in the world, Hatem Ben Arfa, in my opinion, if he stuck at it a bit more. But you know, there lies an issue with a lot of people, of course. Now, we've had earliest memory, we've had best player, or favourite player, I should say. What would you say is your best memory supporting Newcastle?
Well,
I know it's a big question. I know
it is. I would say following Newcastle away to Bruges. I mean, going away to watch Newcastle in Europe, it's just. I mean, that's going back some now. That's 2012. It's 9 years ago. But I can't wait to see those times again. I mean, just Bruges, just perfect. Just about the right distance away. The Europa League is on a Thursday. I think that's a perfect night to be watching football and going away anyway. Much better than a Tuesday or a Wednesday. So long live the Europa League. Bruges is just a fantastic city. Get across on the Channel Tunnel. It's only about an hour and a half from Calais once you've crossed over. And just stunning, like just like the film In Bruges, but full of Geordies. Just absolutely taking over the town. I mean, anyone who was there would probably say it was one of the proudest moments of supporting Newcastle. You know, the game was neither here nor there. We got a decent point. We drew 2-2 after being 2-0 down, but really it was just the entire experience and just that pride that we were there representing our club overseas, which we've not. I'm trying to remember if we've been in Europe since. I don't think
we haven't. Not since the Europa League. No.
So I can't wait for that to come back again because that was just a phenomenal experience.
No, I agree. And finally, Yousef, just to sum things up, this is a big question, by the way, which I always ask at the end of these videos. What would you like the future at Newcastle United to look like?
Just want to see us trying to. I want to see us win something. I mean, it's actually that simple. I mean, I can overcomplicate it by saying I want us to see us play with these principles. I'd like to see us lift a cup.
Yeah.
I really, really would like to see us lift something that isn't just a trophy for us to be promoted back to where we come back from the previous year.
A major trophy, essentially.
Oh, goodness me. I would absolutely love to see that. And I would love to see that in my dad's lifetime as well.
Yeah.
You know,
likewise with mine as well. Yeah.
You know, I mean, I imagine you got into Newcastle because your dad supported Newcastle.
Certainly did. He had a season ticket since 1969 and still has it.
Yeah, well, 69. That's so. Yeah, I mean, that's the last time we won anything.
He is. I mean, I don't know if he remembers it that well, considering he was only 6 at the time. But certainly from the early 70s on, he has a very good recollection.
Mine's going to be 70 this year, and I would love to see Newcastle lift something, and for me to be there with him.
Oh, I feel exactly the same with that, yeah. Out of interest, if you had to pick one of the major trophies, so Premier League, League Cup, FA Cup, or the 2 Europeans, if you had to pick one, which one would you?
I mean, I'd pick the Champions League, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah. I think if I had to go domestic, I mean, the FA Cup still has a bit of magic about it, I think. But
yeah,
I think to win the Premier League, though, would be it would be.
Oh, I'd take anything though. I
To be
was
fair, yeah, even the League
gutted.
Cup, probably which is the least valuable of all the major trophies you can win, it's still a cup. Which
I was gutted when we got knocked out by Brentford.
so
Really
was I.
really was.
Yeah, oh, just sums up Newcastle, doesn't it? Especially this season as well. Yousef, thank you very much for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Enjoyed that.
No problem. Yeah.
Bring me on.
And as I say, some great insight into the sort of legal processes that a lot of people have sort of had their say and had their bit to say on Twitter, especially. I think that it's sort of a breeding ground for all these in the knows and this and that, blah blah blah. So it is nice to hear someone who actually has an understanding of it probably better than some people else do. So thank you very much for that.
Pleasure. Cheers, Dan.
Yeah, thank you all very much for watching, and how are the lads?
Weird lad.